Hello, hello, hello. Good morning or good evening to my dear friends in North America. How is everyone? This is going to be a short one today, only 2 hours. So it's just going to be I haven't invited anyone. That's why I haven't sent you a link, Lukey. It's just going to be a full-on Q&A with yours truly, and that's about it. Yes, we are picking up pace. Richard, good to see you. Well, we could call it that, Devox. Time to rock and roll. Yes, that doesn't sound too bad. God, I was expecting more people to be on the... Where is everyone? Didn't they get the message? Oh, they're starting to come in. Numbers are starting to pick up. It's going to be one of those slow beginnings and then a race to the finish. Ah, yes. Nothing new there. It's my sort of week. It's been a bit all over the place. Trying to sort out some electrical stuff for my dad. That's sort of, had the electrician over, realised that they'd connected the heat pump incorrectly, so I had to sort that out. And then there's a couple of other issues, so yeah, see whether that sort of works out, because I've asked the electrical company also to sort out their, to change the meters, just in case the meter's faulty. Don't know yet. We'll find out with the next bill. So he's had a few issues with his bills. So it's a bit annoying. But anyway, shit happens. Hit the like button. What are you doing? Well, if they're not hitting the like button, they're not doing very well. Hit the damn like button. Yeah, so been a few things. PC still fickly a bit. It's been crashing now and then. I need to basically rebuild it, but I just haven't. I've been too lazy to do it. So, don't talk evil words just in case it's listening and it does something crazy. We don't want that happening. G'day, Deborah. And Tinks as well. I did miss you. Fitness compilation. Always good to see you here. Ah, yes. Just received the notification. Yes. It's a bit... actually, the survey bitched and moaned about how bad the YouTube service is to, creators like myself. Yeah, so maybe that's why you guys are getting late notifications or no notifications. Because I said, oh, we're not monitoring this. So, yeah, they probably are. And just lying about it like normal and taking a bit of revenge against me. Yes. G'day, Nikki. And Necro Kitty. Yeah, so, yeah, I'm always fascinated with the YouTubier people. But you guys should know what time I usually start and what time I usually finish. Well, not what time I usually finish, but what time I usually start. What time I usually finish can be all sorts of erratic amount of hours. So depends on how, let's say, I lose track of time. Yes, something like along those lines. But yeah, so it was trying to sort out Dad's electrical stuff. Got sorted. A few other things. So yeah, Never, never a dull moment in my life. And also chatted with my younger sister as well. So she's doing fine. She's just sick and tired of the lockdowns because she's in Melbourne now, moved from WA. So she's a bit over it. And, she just realised that, she thought it was bad in Perth. It's even worse in basically in Victoria, these constant lockdowns and stuff like that. It's just, let's say it's upsetting her. Because she was a bit isolated over there, and now she's isolated from family, when the isolation goes up, she has to call my mother, sister, or me, or or one of the other relatives or whatever. So because you can't get to see people. Yes, unfortunately, that's the reality we're living in, and these politicians won't give us an idea when they're going to basically change their behaviour. So it drives me up the wall in that regard. Anyway, move on. Talk about oxalates. I've talked about oxalates all sorts. You've seen my lovely video about how oxalates can embed themselves in young children and young born and stuff like that. If the mummy is eating a lot of this sort of shit, think plant-based mummies, is not a good thing. Go and check that one out. You know the one that I'm talking about. Yes. What's the next compilation talking about? Okay. Would whole food plant-based omega-6 like the nuts be a problem in regards to omega-3 versus 6 ratios? Depends where you're getting your omega-3s. At the end of the day, it's really the omega-3s. Do you need to convert the omega-3s, or are you getting them from animal sources, and so you don't need to convert them? So if you're not, the only time you have to worry about ratios is when you're actually getting it from plants. So if you're getting them from a plant source, ALA, and not EPA and DHA, because you still have to convert ALA through the same enzymatic pathway. You have to convert it into EPA and DHA. And that means if you've got too much omega-6, then it basically dominates and reduces the conversion rate of EPA and DHA. But even if let's say you're restricted, you found a way of actually restricting, which is not practical on a plant-based diet because plants do have more omega-6 than 3. But let's say you found a unicorn plant. This is the fantasy land of the plant-based people. Now, you found a unicorn plant that basically had more omega-3s than omega-6s, because I can tell you, even if you look at things like walnuts, they have more 6s than 3s. And you found such a plant, such a magical unicorn plant. And you basically then consumed that. You would then end up potentially with a deficiency in omega-6. So the reality is, as long as you actually have to go through this pathway to convert either LA to AA, to arachidonic acid, linoleic acid, or ALA to DHA or EPA, you're still in the same conundrum either way. It's a problem. You're not getting the essential fatty acids that your body needs. That's why you have to prioritize foods, because foods will basically provide you all the forms of the essential fatty acids. That means you'll get the DHA, the EPA in the animal form, so you don't have to convert it. And you'll get both arachidonic acid in animal foods, but you'll also get linoleic acid, which you will convert to arachidonic acid. So in that regard, it's a non-issue. Ratios are unimportant because you're getting it from, you're only actually taxing one essential fatty acid component, which is linoleic acid, LA. Animal foods, plants don't have arachidonic acid. It's an animal omega, 20 carbon omega-6. So you will basically get it from that. So, do you really need to worry about it? No, you don't have to worry about it. It's the reason why people who are on a low carb diet, a ketogenic diet, and are eating an animal based such diet, when they actually check their arachidonic acid levels, they're very high. But so they're in very good range. They've got very good levels. They've got very low LA, and they've got very good EPA and DHA, because there's not a requirement. The requirement only becomes a problem at that when you're dealing with plants. So yes, unless you find a unicorn plant, it's not going to work. So let's say you are a carnivore, and for some reason you like to eat a few nuts. Okay, that's not going to be a problem, because you're dedicating, as long as you don't go excessively, you're dedicating that conversion pathway just to omega-6s. So you'll convert all those, to basically arachidonic acid. So, but I wouldn't go excessively, because you don't want to overtax the conversion. There's a rate limiting. There's a certain level of conversion that can take place. Okay, so it's not a free for all. Let's go crazy. But the issue of conversion is irrelevant, more or less. The word is on a carnivore diet, as long as you're not basically having other inputs, plant-based inputs, or what I call indiscretions. So I hope that sort of cleared it up. I thought I actually made that clear in my other videos that I've done on omega-6s and omega-3s and all that, but maybe it's not clear enough in my ravenous sort of state of polemic. So yes, so remember, these plants are not unicorn sources of omega-3s. Yes, as well. Nah, that's not going to happen tonight. I can tell you it's not going to happen tonight. I've got other things to do. That was a one-off. Oh, yes. G'day, Kate. And Trouble. Yes, please hit that like button. Yes. Give us those claps. Why did hit and like trigger a YouTube prompt? It's crazy, isn't it? I think the notification's been going late today, because I actually did the survey yesterday and bitched and moaned how awful this YouTube service is to creators like myself. I've actually just set up my channel on Rockfin as well, but I haven't actually got it started, so I haven't put anything on there yet, and I haven't done anything. So I haven't even actually updated everything on Library yet. So I'm going to do that later in the middle of this year, when I'm going to have more time, because I'll be working from home, so I'll be working less hours. And as a consequence, we're going to try and use some of those extra hours to basically add more context. And I'm also going to take a bit of a break from work as well, probably a week, and I'll have a week where I'll just do a bit of content and try and upload a lot of stuff on those other platforms. I want to get also a lot of my live ones as well, but I know that there are limitations on Library, so I may have to split them, like creating parts 1, parts 2 of the live stream. So yeah, so that takes a bit of effort, and I've got a lot of live streams, which means a lot of editing time, to say the least. So yeah, I'm not looking forward to that part. Any volunteers? Last time I was this early, nobody had those blue wrenches yet. Oh, yes. You're missing people with a wrench. How are you, mate? It's good to see Same Smug here on a regular basis. Thank you for being part of the live stream. Are you going for a solo stream today? Yeah. Good. Yeah, I'm just going to do a 2-hour. It's going to be quick, and just answer many questions as I can within those 2 hours of people's, and then sort of move on. This is the Mouse episode tonight. Yes. We're plotting to take revenge for all the experiments they had to endure in Australia. Yes, like these ones. Yes, plant-based mummies. Oh, dead Egyptians. Yes, they had man boobs and everything. Big bellies. Those Egyptians. They were on the perfect diet. What are you talking about, Richard? They're on a plant-based diet heavily. 70% of their diet was coming from grains and plants. 30% was coming from basically animal foods, which were fish, birds, and some other sort of stuff. So yes, they're on the perfect diet. That's why they had cardiovascular disease. They were the very few people that were, because they were always engaging in the Randall cycle. Simple as that. When you combine, fat and sugar, and in particular quite a bit of sugar, the vegan diet most vegan diets, traditional vegan diets, we're talking about traditional plant-based diets, tend to be basically deficient and create deficiencies and all sorts of health problems because they're deficient in protein, they're deficient in micronutrients, the cofactors that are required for the enzymes to work properly. And so their body breaks down. Then on top of that, they're consuming a lot of foods that are rich in deuterium, so they damage their mitochondria and zap their energy over time. So their ability to repair tissue is also diminished. They have more senescent cells, so they will have shorter lives. But what they will not do is engage the Randall cycle on such a diet on a regular basis, like a sad dieter does, or an Egyptian would have done, because they're still consuming about 30% animal foods and combining a lot of carbohydrates, which is what people are doing today. They're eating 70% plant-based and 30% animal-based, highly processed, but still that's what the combination, 70-30, what the Egyptians consumed. Ideal diet, we're told, apparently. Just look at the mess that we've got around us. Say no more. So, yes. What was his name? Lord Rufus was the guy that was actually doing he died actually. Didn't he die? I think he died on a boat coming back from Egypt. Well, I think it got torpedoed or sunk. This in the first, I think it's around the First World War time. Yeah, the early stages. Yeah, something along that. I think that was his name. I could be wrong. Yes. Harry, I've been Carnivore for 2 to 3 weeks. That's absolutely nothing. I go on and off, cheat sometimes, going to stick to it now as long as I can. Only positive results, but whenever I up the fat even a little bit, like with you may have a gallbladder issue, potentially. Not all mice are the same. Yes, I heard that. But let's continue with that. Beef fat or HWC, which I'm not sure what that acronym really means. I get diarrhea the next day. Any idea what could be the problem? Yep, it's probably basically a gallbladder issue in most cases. Could be a diarrhea. Are you getting discolored feces, like the other feces lighter colored? Just put it quickly down there. If you're getting lighter colored, you definitely got a gallbladder issue. It may be gall sludge or gall stones. People that have been on plant-based diets or SAD diets for many years, usually when they hit high fat, they aggravate their gallbladder. So the trick here is to reduce the amount of fat if you've got weight to lose, and basically go more higher on the protein side of things and use taurine and malic acid supplementation to try and break down those stones and try and improve and remove get it to flow better by emulsification and clear it out. So it can take quite a few months, and sometimes it can take a couple of years if there's a lot to clear out and sludge and stuff like that. Depends on the person, depends on the circumstances, depends on what the state of their liver is, on their pancreas and all that, whether there's actually been backflow into the pancreas. It's can be complicated. Exactly. I would go back to my doctor and ask them to do a scan and find out what state it is in. Yeah, because when you get diarrhea from more fat, it's definitely gallbladder related. Are you king of the mouse army, Rich? Yes, he is. Trouble. Yes, he is. I was talking about plant-based ones. Kitty, are you sheltering a unicorn at your place? G'day, mate. Ricky. Hope I'm or a hike, or is it a sort of a silent H and it's a Rick? I'm Reich. Not sure how you pronounce that, but anyway, good to have you here. Have a nice rest of the day, Harry, and everyone in the chat. Oh, thanks. Appreciate it. Good day. And Deborah, I was watching the interview on Food Lies, and the guy mentioned phytochemicals in meats, more in grass-fed. Is there any difference in actual plant ones? Look, when animals actually are consuming grass, they will get a rich variety of both certain phytochemical compounds, but at the end of the day, we're not talking about the same level as in plants. It is processed differently and incorporated slightly differently, but we're not talking about here a massive amount. Small amount, which tends to have like a positive effect because it has like a mild hermetic effect. These phytochemicals, where in plants they're excessively, and if you're consuming too many of them, then you're getting like too much hormesis or too much. It's like a bit of because a lot of these phytochemicals, let's not forget, they are poisons, plant poisons. So when you're getting a very small amount, you get a hormetic effect. As I always say to these people when they talk about phytochemicals and all that, I always say to them, demonstrate with studies true mechanism how these work in a positive way. Because when I actually look at the research, I always find it's primarily it's a hormetic effect. There are some that do have positive effects. As I've always said, plants are medicine; they're not food, and so they can have hormetic effect or direct effect on certain pathways. Like fisetin, for instance, which has a direct effect on forcing senescent cells into death, apoptosis, to basically, it basically literally deactivates their mechanism of survival and knocks and forces them into a death state, a death spiral. So that's a good thing when it does that to senescent cells and cancer cells, but it doesn't do it to normal cells because the normal cells are more robust. So it does it to more vulnerable cells. But if it did to all cells, then it would be a bad compound. But it's not as effective, so it only actually does it to these more damaged cells. So in a sense, it is a toxin, but it only actually works on, the normal cells are more able to protect themselves. So, you could say, yeah, it's got a lot of benefits, but at the same time, it actually inhibits mTOR. It does a whole lot of other negative things as well. So you don't want to be taking it every day. That's why I say 5 days, first 5 days of the month, and no more. So like anything, small amounts can make you stronger. Large amounts can make you sick. So I view those sort of things in a very different way than some of these other people do. So, because I would suspect if you were actually to increase into super doses, this sort of stuff, you would see a lot of negative results, but they never do. It's quite funny how they never do with these compounds, but then they take other compounds that, and then they increase them in certain animals to a very large degree beyond the normal sort of level deliberately to try and actually say, oh, look at these compounds that if you burn, and the thing is, they seem to forget that when you cook any food, whether it's meat, and it creates a charring effect, whether it's toast or whatever, all these sort of compounds, will basically have a negative effect. So, but they've always associated with animal foods because barbecuing meats and stuff like that. So they will argue along those lines. But when they do experiments for these phytochemicals, they never do mega, excessive doses in the rats or whatever. I've always wondered why. Because they've got an agenda to push. So, yes, always think that in the back of your mind. I'm always looking where the con is. Where am I being conned? Where is the deception? Where am I, the wool pulled over my head? I'm always looking for that, the angle and all that sort of stuff. And when you actually look at the research, you look at the stuff and you look at how they construct research, how they construct studies and all that, you realize this guy's got this agenda and that's what they're pushing, So, yeah, there's a lot of dodginess, unfortunately, out there. So, yes, I'm less interested about the phytochemicals. I'm more interested about the other micronutrients that are much more concentrated. There are better mineral and vitamin profiles in grass-fed animals, and they tend to be much better in terms of nutrition. At the end of the day, our body requires those things as cofactors to a lot of enzymatic processes to function properly. So that's the advantage of grass-fed over, grain finished, because all animals are grain. All animals, even the grain finished ones, for a couple of months, they're primarily grass-fed in the beginning. They just fatten them up in the last couple of months. So the reality is, even they have some levels of phytochemicals in them. Even they have certain nutrients in them and all that. And if you look at when they're feeding them in grain, in those sort of areas, nobody's torturing them. Nobody's been, they're in a very comfortable environment. They've got their feeds there. They move around. They eat their feed and stuff like that. Just because animals are people over exaggerate how these animals compared to in the wild, where they are clumped together and actually you can see the tension. You can see basically the hair follicles stand up and all that. That's tension. You can see that in wild animals. You don't see it in domesticated animals. They live a carefree life until you put a bolt to their head and knock them out and then slaughter them. They don't even see the death coming. They live a carefree life for most of their life. There's always idiots out there. But even, I think Sean Baker had a video recently where he talked about, he's actually had a few farmers on and people like that, and also talked about how basically there are a few cowboys, but it took even the, people doing the Dominion and all these other bloody videos, all the different types of videos that they do. It took them years and years to try and collect even a couple of, sort of bits of video because there is so little. But the reality is, we know there's abuse. We know there's abusers. We know there are doctors, teachers, all sorts of people in different professions that abuse other people, both children, other people, and animals. And there are even people, pet owners, that are very bad pet owners as well, and all sorts of people. There's always going to be in our society, nasty people that mistreat others, whether humans or other animals. The reality is it's always a minority that do that. Large portion of us do have empathetic genes, do tend to be less psychopathic or less in that regard. We're less out there gung-ho wanting to kill all the carnivores like Richard, Vegan Gaines, so we're less lunatic like that. Talk about a vegan that basically wants to knock off a whole lot of animals. Yes. Tell me about it. Crazy. Or Peter, that goes around and actually is the one that actually genocides, euthanizes, genocides, because I'll use their language since they use that same language against us, genocides a whole lot more animals than most other shelters in the world. That's the sort of lunatics that we're dealing with as well. But yes, getting back to this sort of phytochemical stuff and all that, so a bit overrated. I wouldn't get too wound up. For me, it's the quality in terms of the omega-3s in the red meat, especially for people who are not eating fish. If you're not eating fish, you better be eating grass-fed, because you're not going to get much of the omega-3 essential fatty acids from grain finished. So that's a very important thing, okay? The other thing is with pork, for me, I do like grass-fed and sort of not grass-fed because it's a monogastric. I do like basically pastured pork, or pork that actually roams around and stuff like that. And the reason for that is because I'm going to get more vitamin D from it. I'm less, because I'm monogastric, I'm less interested in what it eats personally. I don't care. And as I've shown you in that other video that I did recently, the differences between the pastured and non-pastured in terms of a lot of the fatty acid profiles, there weren't big differences. I think the ultimate benefit of having a pork, the actual pig itself, loitering around, and being out in the outside a barn sort of setting, is the vitamin D content is going to be a hell of a lot higher, because it doesn't have, it's like us, more or less hairless, and it's going to have really good vitamin D levels in the skin. So that's, so you can get very good results from that. So I look at those sort of things, because our bodies basically they utilize fats and proteins from animals, and they use a lot of cofactors, vitamins and minerals for the enzymes to function properly and do their job. That's really what the sort of mild hormetic effects that phytochemicals give us, that's just a bonus, and it's an adaptation. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, improves the immune response, immune function. So why not throw a bit of poisonous plant chemistry in there, which will give us a bit of a hormetic and make us a bit stronger and durable. So that's how I see it. People get too wound up about these phytochemicals as if they're something magical. They're not. They're just a low-grade poison, which our body's immune system deals with, and it also helps improve it because it keeps it trained, so to speak. So, yes, that's how I see it. Anyway, that's my opinion. And I think that's borne out when you actually give mega doses of those things. You usually get some really negative effects, which they don't like talking about, because it does affect the plant-based paradigm or ideology. Yes. You want to come on, do you? Okay, I'll send you a link. Actually, the new Proton account is actually improved as well. They've actually changed it. If anybody, whoever's on Proton Mail knows what I'm talking about. Just sent it to you, Lukey. Anyway, back to where I was. Yeah, you could. You're welcome. That was the omega-6 to omega-3 ratios. Yeah, look, it's so funny. It's people get all their knickers in a knot over these sort of things, but when you actually look at the literature and look at it properly, you realize, it's just a beat up from the plant-based mafia, and a lot of people like and also the paleo people in the past, they really, oh God, because basically they just consume so many tubers and so many nuts and plants and stuff like that. And they were getting a lot of these omega-6s, and they were doing their own tests, and they were going, my omega-3s are low. Well, obviously they're low because you're either not eating fish or you're eating too many, of these nuts and stuff like that, and overloading the conversion pathway. So, because they thought, back then, God, paleo people were promoting things like walnuts and stuff like that all the time. So it was just crazy back then. And when you look at the profile of walnuts, it's give us a break. There's more omega-6 than omega-3s in it. I may get you on, Richard. And the other thing is, I am planning at some stage to do like some sort of Zoom thing and send out because you can actually get up to 100 people and sort of like a, first come, first serve type thing, whoever gets on first, and do a sort of like or maybe basically, something along those lines, and just have people turn up, chat, and have like a chat session. So, but it'll have to be on it'll have to be basically like on a Saturday, either a Saturday morning type thing. So it's going to be like, this Saturday I actually ended up, here's Loki. G'day, Luke.
Hello, Harry.
Good to have you here. This Saturday, I ended up going down to the markets, even though it was raining. Sort of spoke to Ling, and she said, I said, okay, we'll go down. Last week I didn't. I tried to do a few things around the house because I was neglecting a few domestics, and then pretty much I thought about maybe I haven't booked it in, but I will do you'll probably get a midweek announcement if I plan to do like a Zoom session. So I'm not actually, it probably won't be this, hold on, just give me a sec. It'll be probably on either the 26th of this month or the 3rd of the next month. So I haven't actually planned it yet. I just want to work out exactly how to do it and test a bit and stuff like that. And then what I'll do is I'll make an announcement, and then I'll put the link, and then people have an invite, and they'll just be able to turn up. So, how many people turn up, got no idea. With Zoom, at least with a free Zoom, at least there's 100 slots. So first come, first serve, so to speak. And it'll just be like a sort of like a round table. We can talk amongst ourselves, like, as if we were in a big sort of gathering type thing. So, it won't be just me sort of running it. It'll be basically everybody interacting with everyone sort of thing. So in that regard, we'll see how it goes. It could be quite loud and very hard to make sense of what. It'll just have to be that, when somebody's chatting or speaking, I may in the end have to intervene and basically have people put their hands up, and then, so, And I have to make also, because of that sort of thing, I'll have to have my other monitor and all that and try and spread it and try and make sure that I can see everyone as well, see how that works. So it's complicated. So I'm trying to work out, so many people turn up, will I be able to see everyone? Will I be able to respond properly to everyone and all that?
I am sure I can help you moderate, especially now that I have a 2-monitor setup. So
Okay. Yep, that could help. Yep. So I'm still trying to work out the mechanics of it. We'll see how it goes. If it, at the end of the day, you give it a try, and if it works, it works. Doesn't. G'day, honest. Good to see you. Yeah. So it's like anything. You give it a try, and if it, it'll either go pear shape or it'll be good, or and become something that'll be a bit on the regular side, so to speak. So yes. Is high blood pressure alone an issue? If so, would diet alone solve it, or are supplements needed? Usually diet does. If you disengage the Randall cycle, you should see a reduction in blood pressure. It's basically an insulin related thing. So the higher the insulin, the higher the blood pressure, the higher the water retention. So basically, you lower insulin, quickest way to actually drop blood pressure is going on a fast. You dump, quite a bit of water in that regard. So that's the quickest way. But, obviously if you're on blood pressure meds and stuff like that, you need to adjust things a bit slower. You don't take risks like that. So you make sure you keep your electrolytes up, you get yourself tested. I do not advise people who are on blood pressure meds to basically be doing like long fasts or stuff like that because of blood pressure related issues. So it's usually what I usually say to people is get your blood pressure under control before you start fiddling around with fasting and stuff like that. So first, basically, and taurine can help. So citrulline, taurine, which are taurine especially is a vasodilator. Citrulline is a vasodilator, and taurine also has an effect on managing the fluids, the intra and extracellular fluids. So it actually has a sort of a stabilizing the osmotic pressures between the different compartments of those fluids. So that's the importance as well, and it seems to manage also electrolyte balance as well. That's the advantage of taurine. So combining the two, initially starting always with small doses, adjusting your meds, and then once you've brought that down to a level where you can get rid of your meds or whatever, then you can start doing other experiments. Don't do experiments with meds. Believe me, it's very risky. Not to be played around with. But if you're not on meds, fitness compilation, then that doesn't apply to you. Some people have poor clearance of caffeine, and caffeine can actually increase their blood pressure, a bit like BART, So, there are people that have that effect. So taking out the caffeine usually can resolve that. And even then, when you bring back a bit, it doesn't really have an effect as long as you don't over-abuse it. So that's what Bart found with his sort of experimentations with caffeine. So that's another element there. So keep that in mind. It's pretty much the only thing that a couple of things but definitely disengaging the Randall cycle is the most important, bringing down your insulin levels. So Figo HD, yes. We're on our regular run, or I am, with Lukey. The rest of them, I've got no idea. I suspect they're fine. How are you, Lukey?
I'm doing fine. Actually, today was a very interesting day because I woke up feeling like limitless energy, and I'm like, well, that's pretty good.
Super Lukey. Garrett, good to see you here. I'm doing water kefir to improve gut microbiome. Use water kefir, keto. I would say so. It definitely would be. So I've never tried water kefir. I've tried milk kefir, stuff like that. A mate of mine has, but I haven't. So yeah, I don't constantly do it. Occasionally I'd probably do it once a year. I'll get some, I'll create some kefir and all that and do it for a certain period of time as a sort of an improvement, especially the lactobacillus, getting the more lactobacillus are really important. Especially if we're exposed to certain foods like, glyphosate is one of those things that depletes lactobacillus. And so, you don't know where you're going to get it. I mean, probably in Australia, it's probably in Tasmania, in the sort of foods that I buy from grass-fed, grass-finished and pastured and stuff like that, it's less of an issue. But there's always going to be some contaminant that you may not know about. Like, let's give you an example. There are farmers that are actually organic and do their right thing, but then the neighbor may not be. And there may be a bit of a wind or whatever, and some contamination may happen at the perimeter, of their farm. But some of the animals could potentially go into those areas and consume some of that stuff, which means it will get into there. So if they usually if it's let's say it was a month ago and then the animal never went back there again for whatever reason, it may be able to clear it out of its system after, a certain amount of time. But if it was immediately slaughtered after that, it may have a bit of a concentration, even though it's classified as organic. So you don't know and in particular in North America and parts of Australia, like Northern Australia, in particular certain areas like in New South Wales, there's a lot of use of Roundup, as we call it in Australia, or glyphosate as it's called in the US and elsewhere. So there are a lot of issues, and it's it depletes minerals. It does all sorts of things. It's nasty stuff. It's an antibiotic, as I've told you guys in the past, and so there are good reasons to occasionally do some probiotics and all that. But even our ancestors, because sometimes, people consumed, rotten meats or the Inuit used to throw rotten fish and stuff like that under, and they would cover it with snow and come back and consume it, many days after. So there was a lot of things that fermented type foods that humans have been consuming for some time to get these sort of probiotics and all that, because we have losses, stuff like that. It's good to replenish those sort of things. So humans have been doing it for a long time. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. Excessively, we never did it. So don't do it on a regular basis excessively as well. Yeah, by adding back rice and fruit occasionally, I suspect they are setting themselves up for long-term damage, potentially. Small amounts maybe, it's not a real big problem. But usually what I find is people still have some dysregulation and don't seem to be able to achieve proper homeostasis with a lot of things, and seem to, when they actually, let me put it this way. When you can't manage your fluids properly for whatever reason, and then you put some of those in, re-engage the Randall cycle, and then sort of retain some of those minerals and vitamins or whatever, in particular minerals, and you're not excreting or whatever else, then you potentially are sort of like feeling that, oh yeah, this is sort of working for me. So but you haven't resolved the problem. And it's like certain people when they basically go, oh, they got a gallbladder issue, and then they've cut out fat, and then they've put tubers back in, having lean meat with tubers or rice or something like that. They feel, I feel much better. Yeah, because you're not actually putting as much fat into the system, and so you're not excreting as much and not putting as much strain on your gallbladder. So, you stuffed up your gallbladder by being plant-based or being on a diet which was devoid of enough fat, so it's solidified, and now it's going to take quite some time to emulsify and break down and all that and clear it out, which basically requires, things like taurine and malic acid and things like that to deal with it. And so, yeah, I feel a bit better, but it's not optimal long term, and the other thing is it hasn't resolved the problem. It's still there. You've only masked it to some extent. So, yeah, I always, when people say, "Oh, I feel better doing this," I always am inquisitive to ask certain questions. Oh, when you consume more fat or do this or whatever, what happens? And then they give you a response, and you go, "Oh, I know what you're suffering from, and you haven't resolved it." So yes, it's usually the case. There's Sheol as well. G'day, Sheol. Yes. Yeah, he definitely is a living mummy, that guy. I haven't seen anything recent of him, but from what some people have told me, he looks really bloody bad. Even Campbell, the guy that did the China study. I mean, remember who was it? Was it Ethelstein was actually holding him up at the plant-based sort of what is it? The plant-based lunatic institute of lunatics.
Hippocrates Institute.
The Hypocrisy Institute. Yes, they were basically, he was basically being held up. These people are very, very unhealthy, and I mean, it just tells you everything that these people are just really in a very unhealthy state, but they've got such cognitive dissonance that they believe so blindly their shit. And I mean, and this is the funny, even Campbell realized that there was something dodgy about, some of the actual research on cholesterol and all these sort of things. He thought it was just bullshit. And then basically all the stuff that, the hypocrites, the other vegan doctors were actually putting up was just nonsense. It was just basically on epidemiological. It wasn't even, proper clinical research. It was just bloody epidemiology. It's just garbage. It's just, but basically, somebody that lives by epidemiology like Campbell, I'm surprised he wasn't aware of this other epidemiological garbage like his. But now he's become aware. So, which means that he'll actually cut these things out even further, which means he'll decline even faster. So, yes. Crazy things. Yes. They do have something to look forward to. Remember, exoskeletons. Exoskeleton devices to be able to move around in, like, assistant type robotics. Yes. That'll be the next thing for the vegans. They'll break down so much, that'll be their only option of getting around. Yes. They do believe in the post-human sort of concepts as well. So it's down their alley. I would rather walk with my own legs.
Old-fashioned.
Yeah, exactly, old-fashioned, exactly, with my own legs and use my own hands. How bloody old-fashioned of me to be stating that. I need an I should be in an exoskeleton. What am I saying? I should be brittle and about to fall apart and be in my exoskeleton. I notice more people are trying to fist bump me after the Sharona debacle. And so I go out of my way to shake hands. That's good. That's good. Pressing the flesh. There's nothing wrong with pressing the flesh. Yes. We've been told not to do that. You will kill grandma and grandpa. Yeah, crazy. All you need to do is give grandma and grandpa vitamin D and put them out in the sun, and they'll be fine. Probably is.
I'm sorry. It's like I particularly I feel strongly about this subject because someone that has been eating a mixed diet with like rice and meat and stuff, and I see these people going back to rice and say, "Oh, I feel amazing," and I'm like, "There's nothing special about that." Uh,
Yeah, all these damn sanitizers. I think the overuse of them is going to create a lot of health problems down the track. Gut microbiome problems, a lot of these sanitizers, insanitizers. Yes. and basically the whole, humans are interacting with other humans, exchanging viruses, exchanging bacteria and all that. That's what makes us strong. We just need to basically maintain a strong immune system with vitamin D. We need to basically maintain, there are going to be cases where, yes, you may have to restrict people, like with Ebola. Those things are really lethal, or if somebody drops a biochemical or a biovirus, they work very rapidly. They're supposed to, they burn out very quickly. Let's say, and that's why somebody actually asked me about, Ivor was talking to someone about 3 months ago and said that about the issue about, in the Wuhan area. And I sort of replied back, look, I just don't believe it. I don't buy that whole man-made garbage and all that. There's probably two things that probably have happened. One, it probably originated around that area in that region, and somebody basically, brought it to one of the local sort of farmers market type things or whatever, and it got, into the population. Either that, or they found it in some remote village somewhere in some, remote area in China, and then they brought it back to the facility, and through some sort of human error or, a breach of contamination protocols and containment, it got into the population. So accidentally in that regard, but it definitely wasn't man-made, because when you're making a bioweapon, let me just explain this to people really quickly. When you're making a bioweapon, the whole purpose of making a bioweapon, remember when Saddam Hussein used, chemical and biological weapons against the Kurds? They are fast acting. You drop them, you kill as many people as possible. It burns its way out. It can't spread to another population. It kills rapidly everyone. It doesn't leave anyone alive to be a carrier. And then you move in and take over the territory. That's how these weapons work. They're not supposed to work where they stay in some people. You get 100% casualties. You knock everyone off. And then there's nobody that can actually spread that virus. Then you can move in and take over the territory. That's the whole purpose of having something like that, a weaponized thing. If something basically is just a bit worse than the flu, it's something that's come from nature, because it's something that is adapting to organisms so it can actually spread more effectively. So it's just bullshit, guys. Don't believe this garbage, please. I haven't seen the video yet. I'll probably try and get a chance to see it next week. But, please don't fall for those sort of, I know sometimes when you have people on your channel, like Ivor or anyone else, you have to be you can't be really sort of, even Bart's had some colourful people in the past, as you've known, Hellman and many others, who have got some, weird and creative ideas. And at the same time, Bart was very respectful, because at the end of the day, you're the host, you're having someone on there. You don't necessarily agree with everything they're saying, but you have to be respectful. And I suspect the same thing was, when it comes to to Ivor in that regard. And at the same time, let's not forget Ivor's not a virologist. He's basically somebody who's comes from the engineering background. Now, he can actually look at research and he can look at stuff because he does have that scientifically based thinking. You know, my sort of field is also part of the engineering area. But one thing that I'm not going to claim is I'm a virologist. No, I do not know a lot about the mutating effects and you know, really complex stuff when it comes to virology and how to assess things. I can only look at what virologists have said and you know, go on that. You know, when I hear Australian virologists saying no, it's not man-made, and it's definitely basically something that's you know, has got very similarities with the previous SARS-1 and a lot of, and so it's come from similar sort of sources, but it's just mutated and changed like all viruses do, or coronaviruses do over time. Then I know that basically that's the case. Now, a lot of this other stuff, where is it coming from? It's coming from intelligence agencies. It's coming from a whole lot of different people. And these people have got vested interest in pushing certain positions and murking things up. Why? Well, there's an agenda, an anti-China agenda. Now, I'm critical of China for other reasons. You know, it's human rights violations and many other things. But I'm not going to basically make up shit. That's just wrong. You know, that's what a lot of states and intelligence forces do. They lie in order to basically to demonize another group. You know, so that's what they do. But at the end of the day, this is not, you know, it's not as if the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party was basically down in Wuhan doing these experiments. No, these were just basically technicians, people that are, you know, young technicians that will work in a lab and fucked up potentially. That's it, you know. So, and it can happen to anyone. It can, you know, it can happen. I fuck up at work. You know, Lukey fucks up at work. Many people that work in different technical fields fuck up now and then. It's just part of life, you know. And sometimes certain fuck ups can be really bad, you know. So let's be, yeah, let's keep this sensible rather than the sort of the lunatic sort of nonsense that people tend to spread out there and make things. I know it's not fashionable, but that's what it is. It's crack pottery and lunacy in that regard. And it's being spread as well by certain politicians and intelligence agencies around the world, specifically to demonize China, you know, using this because a lot of people have been affected by the virus. A lot of people are pissed off about the lockdowns and everything else, the way their lives are. And obviously they want an enemy to vent their anger. And the governments of the West in particular are basically directing that energy and anger away from themselves and towards, you know, China for that specific reason. And that's what's happening. My criticism of China have nothing to do with you know, the virus. My criticisms have to do with the way they behave towards, they had an agreement and they've broken it in regards to Hong Kong. You know, it was, you know, one state, two systems, and they've really just basically ignored that completely. They basically are quite threatening to their neighbors. They are basically moving into the South China Sea and saying this is making claims that don't belong to them, that other nations like the Philippines and others basically have had for a very long time. And also they are mistreating groups like the, you know, the Uyghurs and stuff like that, people like that, you know, in that regard. Now, are there Uyghurs in that region that are terrorists and actually go around killing Han Chinese and doing nasty things? Yes, there are some people. That's the other side. But the majority of the Uyghurs are not terrorists. You know, it's a small minority that are actually doing the wrong thing. But, you know, China's using that as an excuse to go after the whole population, and that's wrong. So two wrongs don't make a right. So we need to basically be objective in the way we assess things and the way we talk about things, and how, you know, and about all the different groups that are at play. And they're, you know, when they do the right thing, we should basically say, yep, they've done the right thing here. When they do the wrong thing, we should objectively say they've done the wrong thing. and we should be much more balanced in the way we actually view things and understand things and all that. Because one thing I find is always, you know, I very rarely find one side being always the goodies completely at 100%. It's not the case. So yes, so don't fall for the propaganda is what I'm saying. You know, use your brain a bit on those sort of things. How does one get the mitochondria phased back into reality? Are you in a different dimension, same smug? You know, the fifth, sixth dimension, seventh maybe? No. At the advanced age, I figure avoiding deuterium only goes a short way. Yes, that's true. It only goes a short way. Look, depends on your, you know, you've seen my senolytic one, now being serious, putting my serious hat back on. You know, just saying phased is like immediately, you know, where my mind went, he's out of phase, Star Trek. Were you beamed from another dimension? You know, so yes, you could expect that from me. I'm always going to be colourful, mate. And I would say, you know, Physatin will help clear out some of those things. As long as you're not in a sort of a, you don't have any cancer or anything like that, which is very critical, then things that enhance stem cell production, like whether it's cerule or whether it's things like, you know, fasting, whether it's things like exercise, whether it's things like niacin, but low doses, not high doses, stuff like that, all help with increasing stem cell production. So yes, so in that regard, I'm glad you found that amusing. Yes, but definitely getting deuterium down is a really important thing in your diet. But, you know, if you're on an animal-based diet, you should have lower deuterium. So I hope you're enjoying some piglets now and then. They do tend to be lower in deuterium than most other land-based animals. Lamb is also slightly lower than beef as well. So lamb's even better than beef in that regard as well. But it's bloody expensive in the US. Supply and demand, that's what it is. There's 5 million sheep in, and there's about 333 plus million US citizens. So that's why it's about 50 odd dollars a kilo. So it's really expensive. We're in Australia, you know, I mean, my last stuff that I bought was less than $10 a kilo. So, but we've got about 70 million head of sheep for about 25 or nearly 25 million people. So it's like 3 sheep for a human. So there's plenty of sheep around, as you can understand. And we're exporting less because China's basically boycotting some of our export products, which means that they stay in Australia. They did the same for crayfish, like, you know, crayfish basically, you know, they were really expensive. And then all of a sudden I could get them for $20, you know. So I bought myself a nice cray and actually cooked it up and put, you know, in the oven and then put a whole lot of butter on it, and oh, that was really nice. Pigged out on crayfish one night. So because most of the crayfish was actually, you know, live exported via airplane and flown to China. And so, you know, then they sort of said, no, we're not buying it. And they go, fine. So the local people had to basically sell it to the locals at a discount, at a heavy discount price. So we were able to get it, you know, pretty much $20 a kilo of, you know, crayfish. So I can tell you, I had a couple of days that I got sick and tired of it, but pigged out a while in that regard. So, years. Anyway, let's move on. I register low ketones for months. I guess I'm utilizing them. Yes, you probably are. That's all it is. Do not bother. Yes, very much. So, what's the protocol for my gallbladder issue? Stay carnivore, high protein, low medium fat, how much taurine, malic acid, get an ultrasound, which will check all gallstones and inflammation. Yep, pretty much. You need to find out exactly what state of affairs you are in, and then just leave a message. I usually reply to the comments much faster than I usually reply to the emails. So just leave a short message and say, yep, this is the sort of what they found. And then I'll just give you a dosage to deal with it. Also, let me know if you're taking any blood pressure meds when it comes to taurine. Very important that I know exactly what the situation is. Good. Sounds good. That's what we're all trying to do. Look, we're all damaged. I mean, I'm still damaged. Lukey is more or less nearly healed now from his Hashimoto's. He just hasn't done the test, but the way he feels, I suspect he is healed. But I've still got issues. I'm still repairing. It's going to take me a number of years to basically fix everything that I've, just because I've been doing carnivore for 2.5 odd years and, keto, low carb and stuff like that for about 5 odd years and all that. I've just, it's been less than a decade compared to the paleo and high. I don't classify them as very, because they still had mixed macronutrients. So I'd still be engaging the Randall cycle at the time. So we're talking about possibly at most quite clean, probably half a decade, when we're having multiple decades of damage before. So it's going to take time, even for me. I know that. I know that I abused oxalates like there was no tomorrow. And I've probably got in a lot of tissue, I still get certain joint issues now and then that flare up. So my father still gets, because he used to eat a lot of veggies, so a lot of greens and stuff like that. So he had gallstone issues. So myself as well, all this sort of stuff. I've still got sludge, which hasn't cleared out entirely. And now and then I get a bit of an aggravation, which is annoying. So I've had stones come out, so I don't have that problem. I can handle a lot of fat with no problems. But then I'll have some sludge come through, and it really just changes. I know, because it changes the color of my feces, and I know some more's come out. So that was probably backed up into my pancreas. So it's still stuff clearing out. So as I said, we're all damaged. That's why we got here, because we damaged ourselves in a whole lot of different ways, and we're still healing. So we're on the same journey, guys, and slowly but surely fixing ourselves and improving ourselves. I mean, I've noticed, Ling, for instance, my next door neighbor, she's been eating, I've been telling her eat more meat, because she's had certain issues. Her back issues have gone away. So, she's had back issues for a long time. And it's just recently where she's been eating I think some days she's eating even more meat than I am. She's much, leaner and smaller than I am and all that. And so she's really gone to town on meat. And she's, she's quite lean in that regard. So I've tried to encourage her to have a bit more fat, because she's becoming too lean. I'm saying, well, you need energy. And she said, oh, sometimes I don't feel as energetic. And I said, yeah, at the end of the day, you still need energy. Once you lean too much, you still need an energy source of some sort. And so she's upping her fat a bit, and she's feeling better. But pretty much her back issue resolved, which is a good thing. But she's still got, a sprained hand and stuff like that, and a few other things that are still, haven't been completely resolved. But that takes time. As I said to her, I said, how long have you been doing it? You've only been doing it a couple of months. I said, what do you expect, miracles? That your back's resolved after many years, after only a couple of months. that's a miracle in my book, because that's faster than happens in many other people. So consider yourself lucky. But a lot of others, a lot of us others, because she's probably lucky that she's gone from a diet that had slightly more refinement and low fat, so she wasn't engaging the Randall cycle so much, so she was never really overweight. She had a bit of weight, but not a lot. But at the same time, she probably never had like high oxalate foods and stuff like that to incorporate into her joints and stuff like that, like the rest of us, because we went down the paleo path and the low carb path with a lot of veggies and stuff like that. So we did a lot of those things that we shouldn't have done. And now in hindsight, we've damaged ourselves in other ways, with compounds, that we shouldn't have been consuming in such large amounts. Because even, take a look at a little child, you put some green stuff in front of it, it doesn't want to eat it. It only wants to eat, low oxalate sweet plants like fruit and things like that. And they only used to be seasonal in the past. Or basically things which are like white rice and, things like that don't have as much oxalate. Pumpkins and stuff like that, in comparison to, all these other things. All the greens are very high in oxalate, specifically, in particular, spinach. But, and I was just having spinach every bloody day. So every day, Lukegear, probably for about 5 years, I was consuming spinach, like 100 to 150 grams of spinach, like a whole bag full. Yeah, I know, every fucking day, with with sometimes in omelets, or sometimes with some meat or whatever. That used to be my breakfast every single friggin' day. And yeah, so now you understand why I have these like oxalate sort of episodes that I talk about. And I haven't had one for a while now. I'm hoping that I'm at the tail end. But I had some months back that I actually went through absolute hell. I didn't talk about it, but I actually went through absolute hell I talked about a bit about it, talking about, how I was having urine that was actually just running foamy and stuff like that. I mentioned a bit about it, but I didn't go into detail how bad it was. I was having nights that I couldn't sleep because I had so much pain in my kidneys. Yeah, exactly. So I've been through oxalate hell, Yeah, I know, it's a lot. Yeah, the crazy things that we do. I was trying to get my health back because I was trying to do everything, but didn't realize that sort of stuff was so dangerous because it was being promoted heavily a couple of years back in the low carb and keto community. And we all jumped on it, so the last 10 years since my cardiovascular episode, I've done a lot of stupid things and stupid experiments on my body. I'm glad I've got to Carnivore and I've jettisoned a lot of that garbage. But the problem is a lot of that stuff is still in my bones and still in my tissue, and occasionally gets released and occasionally gives me hell. And I do suffer for it. So, it's the reality. I had, what was it, about a year ago, one of the worst joint pains that I'd had. It was really bad. And I was just basically citric acid as much as I could. And within probably took me probably a bit over a week, 8 or 9 days. And then I got complete relief in that joint. And I haven't had any problems in that joint since. But it was basically oxalates, that were really just sort of probably releasing and cleared out as you got turnover and all that. I don't know how much more there is in that sort of area, but I haven't had any pain in that joint anymore. So I'm hoping that was it, but I can't be guaranteed, considering looking at that other work that the stuff on oxalates and the stuff how they incorporate in the bones and stuff like that. All I can say is probably because I was actually consuming less calcium at the time and a few other things, and probably that helped incorporate less of it in those joints. So I'm just hoping, I'm just, basically that I'm not going to, I know Remicla, they thought that, but they are bad, they are bad, mate, so when you consume those vast amounts and you suffer quite a bit, you realize, why the hell did I do that to myself? But that's a sort of nonsense. And that's probably why when I hear people say, oh, this really has this benefit and all that, I go, I'm the first to say, show me the fucking mechanism, because I don't trust anything people have to say anymore, because basically there's a lot of bullshit out there. And I just lost some of the other streams. Sorry, guys. I'm a bit slow. And Bloomans, good to see you here, mate. G'day, Bo. Nice to see you. Oops. Click away. What is it doing? Yeah, I'll have to get him on. Got plenty of fans, mate. She's doing fine. She's absolutely doing fine. And she didn't do the additional vitamin D that I requested. She said, no, I'm not doing it. I go, okay, don't do it. She said, I'm feeling fine. I don't need it. It's a waste of money. I go, okay, don't do it. So I tried to force her to have another because she'd done 3 doses of 10,000 IUs of the obviously 20 injectable 25 OHD. So you don't have to wait for conversion. It's a storage form the body can use immediately, and it did the trick. So it would have basically filled up all those receptors in the immune system, and she's fine. She's not going to bother with the vaccine. I said, well, you don't need to, because we had a bit of a chat. And I said, do I need to? I said, well, you've got immunity now. You've had COVID. You've got immunity. Why do it? I mean, the whole purpose of doing it is to basically avoid getting COVID in the first place, so you can get immunity, your own antibodies. The other nice thing about it is looking at recent research that they actually did some experiments on a number of volunteers. Thankfully, it's not an easy experiment to do for people to actually offer them, live people that have had COVID, to offer somebody to tap into their bone marrow. There are risks with procedures like that. Anyway, these people did, and what they've actually shown is that antibodies survive. That means the bone marrow has memory of that. And it doesn't surprise me, because we know the same thing exists for SARS-1. This is SARS-2. For SARS-1, we had lifelong immunity. And as I said to Mira, you've got lifelong immunity now. It's been proven through research. And I sent her a link and I said, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to, basically. You've got it. You had it. You've got lifetime immunity. You're done. Don't worry about it. She says, oh, great, easy. So that's so she's quite happy about that situation. I'm still happy about how we're locked out from unable to go overseas travels, but that's another story and relates to me and my loneliness and hers. But anyway, that's another issue altogether. I knew Kate would jump to the to the offer of something like that.
Yes.
Look, it's easier basically, because asking questions sometimes is a hard thing, because you lose track. You can only ask things we're on a live thing. You can ask them, you can get feedback from me, and then you can basically, or somebody else may say, look, put up their hand and say, look, I've had such and such as an experience. So somebody else's N of 1 can be quite useful to another person in that regard. So we're here to help each other, and I'm just sort of, you could say, a vessel or a portal where people can interact with through my channel and get something of value out of it, because we're all on the course of trying to improve our health and trying to get longevity, fix a lot of the problems and stuff that we've inflicted on ourselves, like I have with oxalates, a few other things. So yeah, we're all trying to basically heal ourselves in a whole lot of different ways, and yeah, it takes time. It's the reason why, even though I'm not using citric acid, I still use a certain amount of MSM, and because I do get a bit of citric acid from lemon juice, like when I put lemon juice, and I do tend to eat more pork, which I like lemon juice on pork. So I still get a bit, which is good, and that probably keeps any small amounts of oxalates being released, but also any amount of oxalate that does get released is also being dealt with that additional sulfur, so it's not depleting my sulfur stores. So I'm not going crazy on sulfur. You don't want to be going, we're not talking about here. I don't recommend people do, like massive grams. I do about 1 gram of MSM, at most. If you want to basically improve sulfur in your body initially, you may want to go up to 3 for a certain period of time, a couple of months, like 3 months, and then drop back to 1. So, just to increase, especially if you've had a lot of depletion due to oxalates and many other things, just general environmental, get your sulfur levels up. But, you have to think always naturally. Say, would I in nature as an animal, roaming around, would I have actually had the same access? No, I wouldn't have, But the thing is, I don't live in a natural environment. I've done certain things that have actually depleted or created certain things. So I need to put some of that back. Once I put that back, then the diet should handle the rest through methionine, which is a sulfur amino acid, taurine, sulfur amino acids coming from the diet. The only reason we add a bit more taurine in later ages is because we synthesize less, and we don't want to tax. It's a biohack. We're saying, I'm getting older. My body's got more senescent cells. It's going to has less capacity to repair, synthesize things and all that, because it's got less energy as well. Because it's declining mitochondrial efficiency, more senescence, higher, what's happening? Higher CD38, more breakdown of NAD, less energy production, less efficient, less repair, less enzymatic, capacity to basically produce more taurine. So it's a general decline of a lot of functioning of the body. So I call it a functional decline that actually takes place. And how quick that functional decline happens depends on how much damage we've already caused it, the organism, us, so to speak. But what we can do is basically do these little biohacks that don't create disruptions. We have to be very careful. That's why I always say, with niacin, don't go higher than 300. I usually stay around the 200 mark, which I consider a very safe area, or below. I'm even less willing to go even higher, So I'm very cautious about certainly. I'd rather be a bit more conservative than be a bit more reckless, like some people are out there. So do no harm should always be the opinion of people. What other people would do, that's their business. But as far as I'm concerned, I want to keep things within what would be naturally and what could get depleted over time because of unnatural things that we do to ourselves. And then how do we mitigate that and that's how to balance those things. I don't believe more is better. You have to basically get the right dosages or right adjustments for the person, and you will get the better results that way. Long term, it'll be sustainable as well. And that's what we want. We don't want people who go out there to do all these crazy high amounts of certain things, and then they create other imbalances to themselves and other health issues. And then they run, they may have high levels of pantothenic acid, like high B vitamins, for a long time. And then they go, oh, I can't sleep anymore, and I've got all these. Then they go for other chemicals, and they're constantly chasing chemicals, to try and fix something which they've creating a whole lot of imbalances. It's like the electrolytes, you excrete only this amount of magnesium, 120 milligrams. You're eating more of it, and the body will only take as much as it needs if it's properly regulated. It's only when it's dysregulated. When you're engaging the Randall cycle, you will create dysfunction. It's like, why people are eating more meat, have hemochromatosis, and don't have a problem. And it doesn't surprise me. When you look at basically the past, we go to the past. Do you remember 50 years ago or 30 years ago, people talking about these sort of hemochromatosis issues? They didn't exist. Or people, barely knew them. They were very, amongst very wealthy people that ate a lot of rich foods, as they were called. They had a lot of sugary stuff because they could afford it. Refined sugars were very expensive in the past, so only the rich could afford it. Only they would get engaged the Randall cycle and get sick. But most of the average people didn't. They were eating basically animal foods and some greens, now and then, and some vegetables and stuff like that. They weren't really eating a lot of different, those sort of things. But what was happening is these people, at that time, they identified a lot of these things that we identify now. I mean, a whole lot of things. I mean, there are like even macular degeneration, like they used to do atlases, all sorts of things. People used to basically dissect they actually used to do more dissection of bodies back in the 19th century and all that than they do today. Doctors today have probably less experience dissecting bodies than the doctors back then. They knew more about the inner workings of the human body, and they created detailed drawings of the way the body works and all that. So they knew their shit, believe me. It's usually the modern doctors that only know about some, surgical techniques and pharmaceuticals that have got no idea, have never seen the inner workings or pulled apart an entire body and cut it up and looked at all the different vessels, blood vessels and everything, and how they work and all. So those doctors back then really knew their shit. Let's not, because a lot of people sometimes say things, oh, they had no idea. Bullshit. They had seen these sort of things, they had recorded them, and they'd even drawn drawings of exactly what the pathology was. And they knew quite clear what arterial calcification was. They knew it way back when they were doing on the mummies and looking at it. And and on cadavers in the past, they'd seen it. So they knew what it was, but it was very rare in humans back then. It was quite common in mummies, and that tells you something, because they were doing like the modern day diet in terms of ratios compared to animal foods and plants. But people 100 years ago were eating more animal foods and very rarely had anything, except the rich, who indulged in more Randall cycle activating foods by throwing in additional sweets and stuff like that because they could afford them. But we have to look at that literature because it gives us a lot of insights and stuff like that, and explains why certain things are different nowadays and all that. So they are useful in that regard. But generally speaking, a lot of us, the dysregulation that we've got and all that takes time to correct. And, and so, these Zoom meetings will be handy in that regard. We'll try the first one. I hope it goes well. And then we'll learn from them and we'll improve on them. And, we'll try different scenarios. I may even have like an invitation system. I may have to set up some sort of thing, So yeah, so it's maybe an online thing where people get invites to create different groups for specific types of conditions. Maybe another thing in the future. So it's things that I'm thinking about, but they could be quite helpful in that regard. So yes. Anyway, it's just, I'll tell you where it came from. There was, I can't remember her name, some doctor, and I can't even remember who she was talking to, but she basically, her mum had cancer and she'd actually gone through, sorting all that. And she likes to do these sort of classes together with people. And she found that as a doctor, a one-on-one isn't as effective as having a group where the group keeps everybody honest. They work, they collaborate, they share ideas and stuff like that. And she learned more that way through the group thing, but also the people in that group learned a lot of things and things that they could action. So that's how that. So it's not my idea, somebody else's. But what I'm doing is I'm using that same concept and saying that's a nice idea. It's a nice way that this medical doctor is using to create a sort of a community, small community of her patients that basically can help each other. I'm trying to do something similar for my subs in that regard. So that's the sort of thinking behind it. But it's not my idea, it's someone else's. Yes, he does. That's true.
Indeed.
Yes, with Discord and stuff like that.
Yes.
Hey, Harry, have you seen any of Elliot's? No, I haven't. I've been too busy with a lot of my stuff to, he says high dose of thiamine, riboflavin, B7 can heal skin conditions. Riboflavin, definitely. I don't subscribe to the notion of high dose of thiamine. We only have 18 days of storage of thiamine. That's it. So, yeah, you can take high doses and saturate your system, so to speak. But at the end of the day, it's not what I would say. Let me put it this way. I do intend making a video on this, why I think overdosing on thiamine can be problematic. In that regard, I think it's like overdose or taking very high doses of NMN, niacin, or nicotinamide, or any of these sort of things that actually push NAD up. If you've got CD38, which is a protective mechanism, and you push these up, you will basically potentially worsen the condition, make people vulnerable to certain, especially if they've got, cancer in the family or whatever. And you will put them at risk also for overloading the electron chain. Thiamine may potentially cause a similar risk. I've known people that have taken high dose of thiamine, and rather than improving their energy initially, they got a bit of a boost, but then it didn't do anything for them after. And I think it maybe potentially there is a good reason for the rate limiting enzymes that are in that area. So in terms of our physiology, so, and that's probably, what's the pyruvate dehydrogenase, which is the one of them that comes through. That's a rate limiting. And what's the other one? Alpha ketoglutarate dehydrogenase, which is the other one. I think that's which is the other one. That's also rate limiting. And that's only fat and protein come through that, and sort of sugar goes through that. A second goes for pyruvate dehydrogenase 2, dehydrogenase. And the reason for that is another reason why when you're actually on a carbohydrate metabolism, you need double the thiamine, because you're going through 2 rate limiting enzymes pathways than 1, in a sense. That's why the requirement goes up, where the requirement halves in terms of the requirement of thiamine. If thiamine was basically the magic pill, I basically think that is a mitochondrial problem, and thiamine is only masking the issue, is not fixing the end of the day. You have to fix your mitochondria. You got to get the deuterium levels out of the system, and you basically have to improve your sleep to improve your melatonin, so the repair mechanism of your mitochondria, and also, get rid of the senescent, the garbage in there, so you can improve the overall efficiency, the mitochondrial efficiency of other cells. So I think it's a much more complex approach, and I think it's too reductionist to think that just overloading 2 enzyme pathways is the idea of fixing things, in my personal opinion. So that's my opinion anyway. But there may be certain cases where people do have true thiamine deficiency, and an overdose can actually cause saturation and help. But I don't think that it's the majority of cases. And I think that it's, again, he's a naturopath, and again, a sort of a naturopathic approach to things. A vitamin or mineral will always fix things. It's like the MDs. It's a drug that always will fix things. I don't subscribe to those reductionist notions, and I believe the body is a very complex system, and you need a multi-prong approach, and a species-appropriate diet usually resolves a lot of these issues over time, with small amounts of inputs in terms of supplementation to fix things. Excessive amounts, especially for a long period of time, can do more harm than good, in my personal opinion. So I still subscribe to him. He's got some really good information, and he's got a good understanding of a lot of the biochemistry and biochemical pathways. But just because you've got a good understanding, it doesn't mean basically you can't fall into the reductionist trap. It's happened to me as well. And I've pointed out a number of cases where I've fallen into the reductionist trap. It's very easy to fall. It's what the repeat people do. They fall into reductionist traps. They don't see the body as an interacting organism with complex pathways that are interacting, and then you can't look at them in isolation. When you focus on isolation, you end up concluding, that everything is fixed with a hammer. Everything's a nail and fixed with a hammer, and that's not the case. We have to be very careful of not falling into the reductionist realm. A lot of us do. I sometimes have to drag myself kicking and screaming out of certain, where I've known I've fallen in, I've gone, oh shit, yes. And I've had to drag myself kicking and screaming, because I said, it must be something here. I don't talk about it. And then when I researched further, I realized that I was an idiot, that I was wrong. I had fallen into the reductionist trap. So everybody's vulnerable for that. Everybody's vulnerable for this sort of black and white and all that. But that's, until I've actually resolved it in my head and really hammered it. That's why I call myself No BS. I go down all the different check all the different pathways, all the interactions. And if I can't work it out, I just say, I don't know. None of the others know anyway. So I'm not actually claiming anything different than the others. And if anybody's claiming any different, they're just claiming garbage as far as I'm concerned. But in my opinion, the reality is that I don't believe in high doses, because if there was, the only thing that actually the body will store in massive amounts is something like retinol, as long as your liver's working and it's not damaged. Only then. If it's damaged and fibrotic and all that, it can't store, and then you'll have a lot of released in the blood as well of some of that stored, then it's a problem of excess vitaminosis, but that's due to damaged liver. That's a completely different kettle of fish. But, and certain minerals get stored in bones and certain things in large amounts. But I don't see that with thiamine. It's only an 18-day thing. So the body has a very hard limit of 18 days. They've done the experiments years ago, saturating people and seeing how much came out and how much remained in. And so they knew how much the body could actually hold on to, and only that. So, yeah, anyway.
I think I need to leave in like a few minutes.
Yep, that's fine. Yeah. I mean, I've got about 15 minutes to go, and then I'm going to pull the plug as well. So, you know, I just saw Doobie Redneck. G'day, mate. Good to see you here. Yeah, so I'll link my subscribers to this one too. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. Yeah, so it's just the way it is. We have to be very careful, guys, of reductionism, because it's very easy to fall into that trap. You know, oh, there's a magical pill, a magical unicorn that will save you. There isn't. It's a complex systems management that actually happens in the body, and things can get deranged in different ways. You know, it's like the other thing, you know, I mean, when you take in, there are two biochemical, like people that have got, you know, a number of people. Remember, there was a guy that was actually on, I can't remember his name. He had hemochromatosis, and another guy that actually has helped out as well because he was having insulin problems, and he brought down his insulin levels because, you know, and it resolved. It went away. His hemochromatosis issue, you know, his ferritin normalized. You know, everything sort of went normal again. And the reason for that, again, is because it's insulin that plays a role in, you know, hepcidin. And on the other side, you also get a bit of dysregulation within these people because of some of them have like certain types of conversions, you know, when it comes to the actual conversion of non-hemine to hemine and all that, stuff like that. So there are things there as well that can actually create issues. So there's two different pathways, but the big one is insulin, obviously, and the Randall cycle. When you engage the Randall cycle, you will take in more and increase, you know. So especially if you're eating quite a bit, and that's what happens to these people. They end up with far too much being absorbed. You know, remember those metalloproteins? They regulate, you know, how much you're taking in. Well, you can derange all that when you're in a Randall cycle activated state where you're eating a lot of carbs and sugar together, and you're creating a lot of insulin resistance. It's all part of that derangement. All these sort of conditions, hemochromatosis, never was a problem in the past for people, or things like, I mean, the only people that suffered hemochromatosis in the past, or even gout, were the rich people that were consuming sugar, a lot of sugar, and deranging again. Insulin is another thing that deranges the uric acid cycle, you know, again, you know, uric acid, you know, if it's, I mean, the majority of people that have basically gout don't even have high, you know, this is the funny thing. You look at research, and people that have got very high uric acid have very a very small percentage have, I mean, it's less than 1% that have basically gout, and then people that have normal uric acid have higher amounts of gout because it has nothing to do with, it's the derangement of the uric acid cycle. And it's also has to do with people that tend to be diabetic. The nephrons are basically damaged in the, you know, in the actual kidneys, or the kidneys have shrunk. When you've got smaller kidneys, you have more damage and more, you know, dysregulation of, you know, of a lot of even electrolyte management and stuff like that is a problem. Not only uric acid management, but also electrolyte as well. And, you know, again, you know, what's the cure for that? More protein. You know, don't fear protein. Remember, more protein. What did it do to those rats? The higher the protein, the lower the insulin, because they were just eating meat. They were just being fed high levels of protein. 70% of their diet was protein. And all they did was grow to big motherfucker rats, massive rats, bigger than the others, and with bigger kidneys, so they could filtrate. And they had no their kidneys were perfectly healthy, and they were lean as inside. They were very healthy animals. So usually diseases like whether it's diseases which are related to kidney disease of any sort, usually have derangements of uric acid cycle, many other things. And it's all to do with, Randall cycle activation, fructose and stuff like that. When you look at the people that have these conditions, there are always people that are eating too much fructose, are engaging the Randall cycle, have all these other health, interrelated health problems, But again, what do people use? Reductionism. Oh, uric acid's there at the scene of the crime. It must be the culprit. It's the same thing with the LP-little-a. LP-little-a gets upregulated to fix and stabilize plaques, or damage to the endothelium. It's not there. It's like the fireman. It's not there basically to cause a problem. The problem's already been caused. It's there to try and heal and repair and stabilize the thing. Derangements that happen to biological processes have nothing to do with just a component. If it was like that, then based on, remember I've talked about the Bradford Hill criteria, the guy that actually did, with the smoking, the higher the amount of smoking, the more disease, the less smoking, the dose dependency. That's the actual Bradford Hill criteria, one of the actual parts of it. Plausibilities and other. There's a whole lot of how you determine inference of causality, not proof of causality, but inference, the highly statistical probability that it is that and nothing else. When you basically look at uric acid levels being high, it doesn't track. That means you don't see gout increasing. And when you lower uric acid levels, you don't see gout decreasing in a dose dependency. Without a dose dependency, there is no correlation even. So how the fuck these people came up, just because uric acid can combine with crystals and stuff like that, that's because of derangement in metabolism. It has nothing to do with the actual uric acid itself. I mean, in basically plaquing, you get calcium in there, a bit of cholesterol, and a whole lot of other things, fibrotic tissue, which is collagen and all that. Does that mean that collagen is a bad thing? No, if you didn't have collagen, you'd fall apart. It's just there to stabilize, but the majority of it is collagen. And there is also calcium in there to stabilize the actual plaquing. Does that make calcium bad? No. Let's eliminate calcium in a reductionist way. See what happens to our health very rapidly. We die. This is the problem with reductionism. When you actually apply that, the body is using, you have to understand the mechanisms and how the body is interacting and working and operating and using different materials either to bind things together or do this or that or whatever. That's what it's doing. It doesn't mean that that component is bad. It just means that it's using that in a certain biological way to either repair, stabilize things or balance things or whatever. You have to work out what are causing these derangements and these imbalances. And usually when you lower insulin, a lot of these things go away magically. Isn't it funny? When you disengage the Randall cycle, a lot of these things normalize. Funny, isn't it? Bloody hell. Yes. So let's avoid reductionism because it's not a healthy thing and each species appropriate and will have less problems. Hi, Harry. What B complex would you recommend taking? I'm going to have to fucking make a video on this, aren't I? You'll have to wait for another little video. I'll make a little video which will be on the B complexes, and I think it always should be below 50 milligrams for 3 months, and it should combine also only for 3 months and with vitamin D to support the bacteria. The bacteria need vitamin D, basically. You think your immune system only needs vitamin D? No, the bacteria as well need vitamin D, especially the beneficial ones. If you're vitamin D deficient, you will basically have less beneficial bacteria. Let me say that again. If you are vitamin D deficient, which is 90% of the population nowadays, you will be basically deficient in beneficial bacteria. It's probably another reason why so many people have so many health problems, gut problems. Anyway, let's move on. There are so many factors that are at play, which, as I say, salted meat, if you're eating salted meat in the sun, perfect. You're getting your B vitamins, you're getting your D, perfect. Oh, yes. I did a mini experiment increasing my B1 and found my sciatic and pain decreased. Good for you. I mean, you probably improved the energy production in that regard, but you probably had other things that you were combining in the food as well. And probably the other reason is you were probably getting the B1 that you weren't getting enough of. Guess what the best source of B1 and niacin is that help the mitochondria and the lowest deuterium food? Oh, it's pork again. Damn, it's that pork. It's that awful pork that everybody hates. You know, the only food that is very high in thiamine is pork. If you look at most other foods, you have to eat quite a bit of food to get thiamine from other foods. Other foods are pretty low. So at 100 grams, most other foods are, down to about 20 odd of the RDI or less. With pork, 100 grams, which is 3.5 ounces, you basically nearly get 100%, which we as carnivores only require because we're only going through that one rate-limiting enzymatic pathway. So we only require half that. So even with 50 grams, which is 60 grams probably, which is about 2 ounces of pork or bacon, basically covers all our thiamine requirements. As I said, there's, if you don't eat a lot of pork, some people don't, I do, at least throw the occasional bit of bacon have a bit of bacon every day. Get your thiamine that way. I still don't believe in overloading it. Getting enough from the diet is more than enough for most people. Small amounts, like higher doses from supplementation, fine. I've done it in the past, but mega dosing, I'm not into that. That's my opinion. Take it as you like. I've seen some people that have done it for a very long time and have ended up with more damage, mitochondrial damage. So I'll leave it at that. I can only go from N of one of other people that have actually tried it and actually had negative results in the long run, and it no longer worked. So don't megadose. Don't put too much strain. There is a reason why those enzymes are rate limiting. They should only get what they need and shouldn't be overloaded. It's a good reason for that. It's like over revving something for too long. It's not going to be a good thing in the end. You're going to wear and tear the system. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. It's really modern foods are highly refined. They're crap, guys. They're really crap, in that regard. Plus, we don't eat raw. We don't consume raw. Very important. Raw meat. Raw milk to bind the lectins, which I've told you about lactoferrin. So, I mean, if they were going to do one good thing, these idiots, you'd think that basically, enrich these shitty foods with a bit of, something like lactoferrin supplementation.
Yeah. It's kind of
they could probably help a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's not like they don't know about it, because lactoferrin sprays, they are actually used in like meat processing facilities to hygienize the blades and stuff. So they know about it.
Yeah. Oh, look, exactly. It's a crazy situation, but it's cost. I think it's just cost. It's really down to cost, less governments legislate. But yes, is recommending 300 and 400 of B. Yep, I think that's probably about too high in the B ones. And I'll just go to let me just bring this up. Riboflavin. Let me take that out. Oops, wrong one. I'm forgetting my bloody stuff. I nearly was looking at clicking it elsewhere because with the the sort of with Restream, it's slightly different. You've seen how it looks internally, and I'm going, oh, you're in StreamYard, Harry. You're in StreamYard. You fool, you idiot.
Amateur hour.
Yeah, basically an amateur hour, pretty much. And Blinky's not even here to basically give me a serving, which is good. You'll probably hear that and then leave me an evil comment. That Westy. So, as an example, if let's say somebody was to consume, as in beef, so 400. Divide that by 0.9 times 100. So that's the equivalent. To get the same riboflavin from beef, as an example, you would have to consume 44,000 grams, or in this case, kilos. 44 kilos, 44.4 kilos of beef. I'll do the ounces and then I'll do the pounds. Oh, 3. So 1,500 plus ounces of beef divided by 16. And 98 pounds of beef to get the same amount. So as you can see, there is no way any natural person in the wild, like somebody like a Maasai or whatever, would ever be able to consume that amount. I have problems with megadosing, especially when you've got mitochondrial, because yes, riboflavin does help in the mitochondria, and so does thiamine, which I've already explained, through those two rate limiting pathways. But at the same way, we're talking about, if you've got mitochondrial damage, adding more fuel to a system that is damaged. Just think of it. You've got an engine and you're overloading it with fuel and choking it. It's not going to work better just because the engine is damaged. You have to fix the engine. It's not the inputs. It's the damaged engine. So, just because something uses a pathway, temporarily you may get an improvement, but you're also revving up that system, which means you're degrading it and damaging it even faster. So, as I said, I think in terms of, 1.3, it's 400 divided by 1.3, that's about 307, nearly 308-fold. Do you think that's normal? I don't, personally.
Yeah, doesn't seem normal.
No, it's not normal. I don't understand where, and the thing is, he basically says that you use more. I didn't want to be nasty, but anyway, he basically says you can use more, but let's put it this way. More isn't better. And he basically says it's not a deficiency. It's not a vitamin deficiency. And I know it's not a vitamin deficiency. He calls it a structural or functional deficiency. Is that right? Something along those lines.
Yes.
And I'm going, okay, then show me mechanism. Show me the mechanism. You're putting shitloads of stuff in, overloading certain pathways. You're actually putting more than the body can actually store, handle. At the same time, if this person is sick, it's got poor kidney function, all that, they still need to excrete the excess out. You're putting a lot of strain on this body. You may get some initial effects, and it can also be placebo as well, potentially. But long-term, a lot of these people complain about a lot of side effects and it doesn't work and all that. He's even done a video on that, side effects and stuff like that. I would say it's a contraindicated thing long-term. Eat species appropriate, and over time you will heal your body and your body will find its own homeostasis. Again, people rushing around with, I need my pill, my magic unicorn to save me. That's the problem with a lot of people. Look at pork. Bacon has got slightly more thiamine, especially if you get, so you look at lean pork, you have basically 100 grams and you'll get 56%, which basically is more than enough for that one pathway that we carnivores use. So you could basically get all the thiamine requirements you need for your enzymatic pathways just by 100 grams, which is 3.5 ounces. And I know I would not be satisfied with 3.5 ounces of pork. I'd be definitely consuming something like 4 or 5 times that.
Yes, at least.
Personally. so basically, if I'm, let's say 400, I'll just go 400, Oh, sorry. 4 times 56%. So I'd be getting about, 224 times. Remember, we only use about 50, half of that, because we're only going through one pathway. So that would be about 4.5-fold more just by having pork. 4.5-fold more. So basically, you're getting enough from just having 1 day pork. You're getting enough for 4 days, because remember, you store thiamine. So you're getting enough. So if you have pork twice a week, and I have more than twice, I can tell you, because I love pork, you basically will get enough in that regard for 18 days for your rate limiting. And that's just, there's still other foods that have, but obviously salmon is the next, and that drops quite a bit to 20, it's not like it's half what you'll get for the same amount. And then that's just bullshit, because nobody's going to eat that amount of flaxseed. And the other thing is the bioavailability is, forget it. That's a joke. It's like a lot of these things. Oh, it's high. Yeah, but it's, it's bound in a certain way. You can't get to it. That's just illogical. To get enough, remember they consume 100 times, 100%. So because they got 2. So if you're having beans, for instance, 20%, you will have to have like 500 grams of beans to get your thiamine. And you're going to be eating other carbs as well, which means you'll actually have a greater increase of requirements for thiamine anyway. So you're still not going to get, and anybody that consumes that amount of beans is going to be very smelly, I can tell you. You won't want to be very close to them. And then everything else, green peas, that's fortified. Rice is fairly low as well. All these are fairly low. You have to eat large amounts of these things. Mussels are not too bad. They're about 25%, a bit like they're very similar levels to basically salmon. Seafood is about the same. A lot of it, seafood, have those Clams, see, 24%, 25%. Oysters is the only thing that actually drops quite a bit for whatever reason. It just doesn't have much in that regard. But, generally speaking, you have a bit of pork, you'll get more than enough. Get over it.
Yep.
And when it comes to, let me just go back to the riboflavin in that. I should have actually selected from their menu. Hold on. Has a tendency, this website, if you go back, it actually stalls.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. You have to go up to the menu, the top menu, and actually select it from the menu. I know I've probably fucked it now because it's really just whining. Fuck's sake.
Harry, I think I need to get going, but I left you something in the chat.
Okay, I'll grab that. And as you can see with the riboflavin, you basically have, let's say, 6 ounces of steak, which is probably about 170 grams.
Yes.
So basically, you're getting more than 100%, which you only need 50% on a carnivore diet. Remember, half that. Milk is another great source too. And that's pasteurized milk. Raw milk is basically over 100%. Wow. at that amount. Again, you have let's say about 250 of salmon. You get everything you need. Mushrooms aren't a too bad thing, but we don't normally consume them. But even pork is pretty good if you're having basically 500. Riboflavin isn't the hottest there, but if you're having about 500, you'll get enough. And usually you have more than, I usually have milk and I have pork and basically a glass of milk in the evening, so I get everything that I need in terms of riboflavin as well. And then these stuff are very low, very hard to access it from almonds, full of oxalates as well. Avocados, it's more bioavailable, but very low amount. Eggs are pretty good. So 5 eggs will give you all your daily requirements. So if somebody's a vegetarian, they can have 5 eggs and get all their riboflavin.
Oh my God. It's just thinking about it on my head. I think I'm getting like 3 or 4 times what I need.
Yeah, but it's not a problem because your body will excrete it will store some of it and excrete the excess. It doesn't, yes. You don't need this whole thing, with when it comes to basically, your B vitamins, it's less of a problem in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes, I felt like that some days when I was actually in oxalate dumping. Spiny all over. Ooh. Oh, yes, painful. Oh, wonderful experience.
There's so many crystals.
It's probably still. I don't laugh. There's probably still some in there in my body.
Yeah, that's
so. I'm just happy that I've stopped having the big dumps that I used to.
Yeah.
They were painful. I can tell you, I had days where, I literally didn't go to work. I was so in pain. I just took the day off and I just sat there rubbing my kidneys on the side of my back, trying to basically and consuming a lot of citric acids or stuff like that to try and having glasses of apple cider vinegar and all sorts of things, trying to flush the stuff out of my kidneys. I was in such agony. I can tell you. So, yeah, in that regard.
Mm. Yeah, 'cause, like, I was in such agony. I can tell you. So, yeah. In that regard. Mm. 'Cause, like, I was in such agony. I can tell you. So, yeah. In that regard. Mm. 'Cause, like, I was in such agony. I can tell you. So, yeah. In that regard. Mm. 'Cause, like, I was in such agony. I can tell you. So, yeah. In that regard. Mm. 'Cause, like, I was in such agony. I can tell you. So, yeah. In that regard. Mm. 'Cause, like, I was in such agony. I can tell you. So, yeah. In that regard. Mm. 'Cause, like, I was in such agony. I can tell you. So, yeah. In that regard. Mm. 'Cause, like, I was in such agony. I can tell you. So, yeah. In that regard. Mm. 'Cause, like, I was in such agony. I can tell you. So, yeah. In that regard. Mm. 'Cause, like, I was in such agony. I can tell you. So, yeah. In that regard. Mm. 'Cause, like, I was in such agony. I can tell you. So, yeah. In that regard. Mm. 'Cause, like, I was in such agony. I can tell
Look, eat a species appropriate diet, mate, and you will basically start recovering. And when it comes to our beneficial bacteria, remember our appendix is our cecum, our shrunken cecum, where we maintain our gut microbiome. And so what you want to do is you want to basically provide enough of the material, which is the B vitamins, a B50 complex. Don't have to go crazy on, because they can cause issues of very high overvitaminosis. And we know with pantothenic acid, overvitaminosis of pantothenic acid, you can actually end up with insomnia. So I'm saying B vitamins are to be played with. Having good amounts is one thing. See, what you'll do is eventually you will restore your beneficial gut microbiome, the beneficial bacteria, and those beneficial bacteria themselves produce B vitamins. So you get it from food, they produce them themselves, and they exchange amongst themselves. They give you some, as long as you're feeding it vitamin D to maintain themselves, and they basically provide that additional stuff. So you don't need the supplements. So once you restore your gut microbiome and it's functional and you're getting good animal foods, you're good to go, basically. And the nice thing about them is these bacteria help regulate, and they also signal through the vagus nerve. So they can actually regulate a lot of different things. And that's a good thing, because you want this sort of good homeostatic relationship with beneficial bacteria. What you don't want is actually derangements in your system and, doing these crazy things. Fix the problems, real structural problems like mitochondrial dysfunction, get rid of senescent cells, start trying to produce more good cells. And as I said, with all the things that I talked about before, as long as you don't have cancer, then you follow the cancer protocol and you exclude things that actually increase stem cells, because cancer cells can hijack that system as well. So as long as you're certain you've got no cancer cells, then you're good to go with cerule, niacin, exercise, fasting, and all that. So even fasting can be beneficial to cancer cells if they actually move to a more pronounced and significant. They start spreading in the body. They actually can use fasting as a protection. So that's I know it's awful, but the reality is things that actually benefit you when you don't have cancer can actually, like a double-edged sword. Doesn't mean that they're bad, because we don't think reductionism, do we, kiddies, in this place? We do not think in reductionist terms. We think in scientific terms, and we know that unless you've got derangements or dysfunctions like cancer, only then can some of these things turn bad. So we've got to be very careful with that sort of stuff, how we say it. Always remember that. Anyway, mate, good to having you here. Yeah.
Nice to be here once again. And yeah, I wasn't expecting to be on, but it's always a nice addition to my Saturday, and being here and contributing with the show however I can. I just want to get some sleep now, I think.
Shell's got a new name for herself, Bombshell.
Oh yeah, I saw that. It's a really good name.
Nice one, Shell. Yes. So yeah, good having you here, mate. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So
glad to help, Harry. And guess I'll be signing off then.
See ya.
See you later.
I'm going to really go fast because I'm not too far away. If it's working for you, good for you. I just think that very high doses are not long term. I don't really subscribe by them. There may be like the outliers in a U curve. Some people that are outliers that get more benefit. There's capacity for some people to store better or utilize better. So there's a whole lot of differences, but I mean, I'm not critical of, because I've made mistakes as well. So we all make mistakes when it comes to that, but I do have a problem with some of the naturopathic, and he's a naturopath, some of the naturopathic notions, which tend to be a bit more reductionist in their thinking. I think ultimately, if you're on a carnivorous diet, and you supplement a bit, you fix up the gut microbiome, you get in the lactoferrin to clear out some of that those lectins that may be around, get a few things like that. You don't need to take lactoferrin forever. You don't need to take a lot of these. You don't need to take the B vitamins forever. They are to be used as a short-term intervention and only that. But I do have a problem with very high doses. I don't believe in the notion. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If Elliot can actually prove to me that there is a true functional with mechanism and all that, how it actually works, that can convince me. From the stuff that I've seen, I'm not convinced. It's associational, it's related, but there is no actual research that I've looked into it, that I've come across to see actual mechanism that if you do this will work, or this will actually will show these sort of chemical compounds or signals that can actually be tested and verified that this is actually happening. I can't see it, honestly. And I see other people that basically just clean up their diet, get better. Why? Because look, naturopaths tend to medicate people. Where I usually say to people, get off the shit that's actually causing the problem. Don't medicate yourself. You can't medicate yourself forever. If you're eating inappropriately, eventually it'll catch up to you. You got to eat appropriately, and short term, I've got no problems. Short term, high dosing, no problems whatsoever. Long term, I do have a problem with that. So short term saturation, I've done stuff like that myself, but long term, I think there's a problem in that, and I don't think it's actually supported by any literature. It's a bit like, the senolytics, 5 days at the beginning of the month, no more, because it does have an effect on mTOR. Does it have an effect on other things long term? Could it be a problem? Potentially. I can't be 100%, but I've got no research to basically be advising otherwise. So the whole thing is do no harm, is my approach anyway. Talk about skin conditions, varicose veins, lead to nasty skin issues. Iron depositing, does oxidation play a role? A lot of that. Why are genes blamed? If it is rather like everything's blamed on genes. Apparently, we've had massive amounts of mutations in humans in the last couple of years. Bullshit. What we've had is epigenetic changes, and those epigenetic changes are due to dietary reasons and other factors, other lifestyle factors. That's what they are, really. If you take the sugar out and you lower the insulin and you disengage the Randall cycle, people's skins clear up. If you add more protein, what's your body built of? People's skins start improving. If you reduce if you're getting enough, not excess, I don't believe in excess, but what you would get physiologically by eating food, in terms of retinol, stuff like that, and niacin and stuff like that, you will improve your skin. Niacin does help with skin healing, and retinol also regulates the collagen degrading enzyme, so they don't get too out of hand and cause too much degradation and breakdown. So anyway, I'm about nearly half an hour over my limit. That was, as I said, never consistent, even with my own self. I'm going to plow through like mad. I'm not going to answer anything because I'm about to pull the pin. Just so everything's on screen. Yeah, look, it's good to stick to 3 months with a B complex, get the gut microbiome to do the rest after, and support it with good levels of vitamin D in the sun, preferable, some from food and a bit from supplementation in the colder periods of the year. The B word. Did she? Oh, did I miss that? The baby word. What are the least toxic plant veggies I can add to my diet? You got a plant addiction, don't you? Look, even though they're not plants, they're a fungus. I occasionally will have mushrooms. I know Bart hates them, thinks they're a piece of shit and crap and all that. And he's probably right. I mean, there's a bit of nutrition in them, but, I just like them. He thinks, yucky. But that's him, which is fair enough. Everybody to their own in that regard. And I actually say it's a fungus. It actually has more. The way a fungus works is more like an animal rather than a plant. It doesn't have photosynthesis. It doesn't have any of this sort of stuff. It's not a plant. Plant, operates differently in that regard. But let's put it this way. Probably zucchini, probably some types of pumpkin. There's very limited stuff, in that regard. Berries tend to be, they also tend to be lower in fructose and lower in a lot of things. So, and just seasonally, that's okay. I don't recommend them all year round. And if you have too much, you can engage the Randall cycle, so not a good thing. If you're having vegetables, they should always be cooked. They should always be soaked and stuff like that. So very important preparation, stuff like that. So I'll have to do at some stage a video on, which foods are the highest in oxalates, which are the lowest, and just basically say, well, these are the plants that have got least egregious issues in terms of oxalates, lectins, and all these other things. And I'll basically be putting it not as a recommendation for any carnivores. They shouldn't be basically eating this stuff. It's not required, but it may be a thing that they can suggest to their family members who are not carnivores, so at least they're doing the least damage to themselves. So you've got an option for your family members. Not that they're basically, good to do, generally speaking, but at least I can provide some options for your families, and for some of you that like cheating a bit on the carnivore diet. Yes. How long do you think it takes to change bacteria in your gut and heal the epithelium layer? Depends how much damage there is. So it will vary. Some people may take a couple of days. Some people may take a couple of months. Depends how much damage there is. The end of the day, it will take as long as it needs to take to repair. That's, but But obviously with the bacteria, the beneficial bacteria, you can bring them back with a good dose of vitamin D, 5,000 IUs, and even, plus in summer, if you're actually sunbaking out there, you probably don't need the vitamin D supplement. You just basically need the B50 vitamins. Make sure the B50 and all of them are 50 milligrams or less. And you do that for 3 months. Your bacteria will utilize them. They will exchange them amongst themselves, and they will basically proliferate. And then as long as you maintain a good vitamin D status, they'll be there for a very long time. If you become deficient, you may have to do this protocol again in a future date. I know one person actually does a yearly, like in winter, just for about a month, but at a much lower dose, like 25 milligrams, and sticks to that, just to basically boost any reduction, because they're eating plants and there's probably glyphosate that's probably killing off some of these bacteria and all that. So they need to sort of make sure that they're getting them back a bit. So that's the sort of reason. So everybody, does things for a whole lot of different reasons and all that. Yep. So there are people that react differently to the egg whites compared to other. It's definitely, there may be some with genetics, and there may be some with some sort of, where there is some sort of underlying autoimmunity of some sort that could also be at play. I've known people that have had resolved their autoimmune issues and their egg problem went away. So yeah, that's it. It's a hard one. You'd have to diagnose to work out which one it was. The problem is a lot of doctors don't really know really well. They're not up to date with any of the research, unfortunately, out there, which is another aspect. There are some aspects of molecule structures that has made people think that it was man-made, furin cleavage sites and binding affinity to. Look, I've heard a lot of stories, but the reality is it just doesn't make sense. And there's other researchers that disagree with these people. So, that have looked at the same data and have a completely disagreement. And when you've got two different camps, two different groups, neither can prove 100%. What's the most plausible? Just think logically. If you're creating a bioweapon, because that's the only reason you'd be creating something like that, a bioweapon, it's the Chinese are shit, basically, at creating bioweapons. Then they are absolute shit. They should, the Chinese government should basically put those researchers against the wall and shoot them because they're so useless, and employ new ones, So I just don't buy it. I don't buy it on that basis. Bioweapons and biological and chemical weapons are designed to kill quick, so you can take over the territory of somebody else. That's the whole reason you use them. They are a weapon of mass destruction that kills really quickly. Remember, Saddam Hussein used that sort of stuff and killed the Kurds, all of them in those villages. Not some of them, all of them. So you kill all of them. You leave no one alive to infect others, and you move in and take the territory. That's how it works. Ebola is more effective at killing rapidly compared to this. And that's not man-made. But it would be a great bioweapon, because you'd throw it in an area, and as long as you didn't allow other people in that area for a while, for a small amount of time, you'd basically be guaranteed when you walked in there, there'd be nobody living to infect anyone else. So this is what I mean. An actual weapon actually has to kill quick, because you don't want it lingering around and risking your own troops, your own people. I just don't buy it, for those sort of reasons. It just doesn't make sense. My sort of position is much more plausible, much more likely. Just because there are so many, look, when it comes to binding sites in any, all bacteria, all viruses are still using the basic nucleic acids, okay? They're still using this. There are only certain binding combinations that can actually happen. So the potential for certain things to happen at random or in different organisms in the same way is possible. We see it in nature all the time. Certain types of evolutionary things that happen in one animal happen to another animal, even though they're not even related. So these things can happen. So to work out something that is man-made or not is extremely hard. The only thing you can then base it, extrapolate from that is, what's the plausibility? If you're making something for that purpose, why are you making it piss poor, which is more something that, is only going to kill a very small amount, just slightly more than the flu? What's the value of that? There's zero value. As a bioweapon, it's shit. So it doesn't make sense. You have to argue away that whole edifice. And if you can't argue away, you've got no argument. You've basically only got speculation. And that's what I find with these people. So just because they use fancy words, it doesn't basically mean they're right. Anybody can use fancy words, but they still can be wrong. There's plenty of them in the past that have been, Ansel Keys and many others. So plenty of crackpots out there that make shit up because they want a reputation. They want to get something, whatever. Anyway, I'm not going to go through because I'm so far behind. It'll take me ages to get through all the links. But basically, guys, thanks for being here. I'm going to go. I better get out of here because I'm already late. See yous.